Thank you, Pierre. Now, this afternoon, we have a group of panelists who are really superb birders, have been birding for quite a while. Peter, I think, goes back to 2 or 3 centuries. I'm not sure. Sometimes I think so. And we have a real professional in our crowd. That's John Neville, and he's a professional in that he records birds all over Canada and North America and offers those bird recordings as valuable guides for you to listen to and compare with nature. And so we'll talk about that at the end, but it's just wonderful to have John as well as Peter. And Kathleen and Pat are 2 stalwart birdwatching members of our Salt Spring Naturalist group. Pat's newer to the island, and both have a wealth of information to share with you today. The photographers for this are mainly Salt Spring Island. There's just a couple of photos that haven't come from Salt Spring Island photographers. A couple of them are sitting in front of you. We also have Farley Cannon, a young photographer who's doing some wonderful work, and you'll see that on this. And we're encouraging you to get out and watch as much as you can. And in the winter, it's actually somewhat easier because really on Salt Spring, we only have about 100 different birds that are likely to be sighted. And today we'll talk about 50 of those and in more detail. These are the birds of forests, meadows, backyards, and so forth. And yesterday, those of you who were there know that we did water birds and shore birds. And so the first group is the eagles, hawks, and merlins, and we talked about the eagle yesterday, so we'll go on with the rest.
I think I'm up first with the Coopers and the Sharp-shinned Hawk. The Sharp-shinned is the smaller of the 2, although the female Sharp-shinned may be as large as the male Coopers, so that's confusing. And secondly, the point on the anatomy that everybody looks for is the tail. And although these 2 don't show it right here, the Sharp-shinned generally shows a very sharp cutoff tail, and it's shorter than the Coopers. And the Coopers tends to be more rounded, but not always visible. So they both can be confusing, except when they call. And I don't know whether John has their calls, but the Coopers is really dramatic, a very strong, sharp kek, kek, kek you can hear for miles. And
I happen to have that one, Peter.
That's the female Coopers, and the male makes a sharper kek call.
Great.
Thanks, John. One other thing, it's fun to watch the juvenile Coopers in the fall trying to hunt. And if you've got a bird feeder, you've probably watched these juvenile Coopers hanging around with feeble and ridiculous attempts to catch anything. And they are such clownish birds trying to learn how to hunt that they get teased by other birds. So jays love to tease these young juveniles that hang around bird feeders, and in the interior, the magpies do the same. So they're a little tough to identify unless you've got one hanging around your feeder all the time, and then you'll probably figure them out. And there are your tails. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Is this you too, Peter?
This is me. Yep. This is the red-tailed hawk, and one of its most distinguishing feature, of course, is its red tail. It's often seen soaring high overhead on open habitats, fields and open woods, and hunting for prey, like rodents and rabbits and ground birds. And it has a kind of a very evocative scream. I'm not sure if, there we go. So
Go ahead. I can't turn it off.
they're pretty easy to identify in flight when you could get a look at an adult with a red tail. And otherwise they have brown upper parts and a pretty broad tail with long, broad wings. And they tend to stay pretty level when they're soaring. And the wings from underneath look pale with a kind of dark leading edge and dark wingtips. But when they're perched, they look, they're quite large and stocky. So again, you can look for the red tail, and then sometimes on the back you can see a kind of light colored speckled V, and on the belly there can be a speckled belly band.
This incredible picture was from Farley, taken at the golf course where it caught a gull.
Yeah, that's a great picture. Anyway, there's a lot of variation in plumage in these birds, but if you're lucky enough to see a mature adult with a red tail, then you've got it made.
That Merlin that's my Merlin. No, I didn't take that picture, but I'm just going to say a few words about him. He is our Pacific race is quite dark. He's actually smaller than a kestrel, and his wing beat is well, he has very pointed wings. He's like a miniature peregrine falcon, and they're extremely vocal around the nest, and even whenever they actually just love to call out loud and clear. You can hear them from a long way off, and John may have that call. And they have become more suburban in recent years. Quite surprisingly, we used in the interior, we'd have to travel a long way to find one in the old days. But now on Salt Spring, one was hanging around in the big cottonwoods above the dock on Cushion Lake for years, and the kids on the dock didn't bother him. And we have had a perpetual nest up in the tall conifers right next to town as you go into town from the south on the right, just past where they've made that clear cut. That's a very popular hangout for them. And they love to soar around teasing hawks and vultures, but really fun bird to watch.
This is you too, Peter.
Oh yeah, well, I'm really having fun this year with the quail. There's a little competition in our neighborhood up on Sky Valley Road, who gets the quail, but I got a lot of them this time, and we're having so much fun with them all winter and all summer. The that quail, this is the northern end of their range, and they pretty well stick to the coast all the way down to Baja California. They're resident. And actually, we had a mountain quail when I first came to Victoria to live here in 1963. I can remember going out and finding mountain quail in the highlands. And they're very similar, but have a very tall, what do you call it? The plume, a very, very tall plume. But they've gone and they've disappeared. I guess it's a habitat problem. But I should tell you that they are really fun. There's the female, of course, and during the when the young have hatched, and even before then, generally in the spring and summer, the male, when they've come around and they want to do some feeding, the male will hop up on a perch above the female and stand guard as he becomes a sentinel, and is very stoic about it, while the female goes about foraging on the ground. It's really wonderful to watch.
The doves.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, this is the rock dove.
which you all would know and see around Ganges. Windsor in particular, since the fire, I'm not quite sure how they're lining up on that property, but I'm sure they're there in big numbers. This is an introduced species from Europe, and it's also known as a feral pigeon. And that is because there have been centuries of what they call near domestication. It comes in all manner of different colorations, everything from whitish and pied to the darker ones and blue. So I think you want to go back. There we go to the rock dove again. So it's somewhat a more interesting species than we think. We tend to look at them there and think, oh my goodness, there's enough of those guys.
I wonder if they sometimes disappear in the winter, because last year I tried to take a picture of them for our show then, and I couldn't find any on the island. And so I had to go to Victoria to find them.
Which is pretty bad, because last year on the count, there were only 20 recorded, and surely we have many.
Related to, yeah, that would be interesting.
Okay.
Peter.
Yeah, we've been lucky in the last few years with a population of about 30 or 40 that have visited us almost every day, and they're fairly common pigeon on the island. This is the north end of their range. Interestingly, the band-tailed pigeons in the winter are spend most of their time down in California, but there are other races farther south, and they range, and they just all look like band-tailed pigeons as far as Costa Rica. What you're looking at is about as close as you can get to a passenger pigeon, which of course went extinct at the turn of the last century, to the point where they are using the DNA from passenger pigeons to clone them using band-tailed pigeon DNA crossed with passenger pigeon DNA. It's an interesting experiment, and they're still working on that.
Can we hear the sound on that?
We do have the sound on the band-tail. Do you want to hear that?
Please.
Which is slightly different than the Eurasian Collared-Dove, which is a migrant into British Columbia in the last few years. Started off in the Caribbean, made it over to Florida, and over the last, 20 years or so, it's been migrating up as far north as here and around the southern BC. And I hardly saw it until last year, when I saw it just about every day at our property. So I'm sure that there are residents now. I heard it a few weeks ago. This is the sound. And of course, the sound is mistaken by some people for owls. They have a little bit of an owlish sound, but if you're hearing it during the day and it doesn't sound like a barred owl, it's probably a Eurasian collared owl, and they're very, very fun to watch. It's around here, they like to feed at the neighbor's bird feeder. The owls are another group that we have here in abundance, and they also make really beautiful calls. So we'll just have a few of those.
And we can start with the great horned owl, which we heard the other night in the middle of the night. Fantastic, because there were.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. So, John, that would be a female and male calling back and forth, wouldn't it?
Yes, the deeper one's the male.
Yeah.
That's the male.
Yeah, and clearly the other evening we heard the two.
Yeah.
the female and the male, a lovely sound. What a wonderful thing to hear in the middle of the night. This is our largest owl. The great horned, the horns are really ear tufts that stay and remain erect. And it's an amazing bird. We learned from Wren Ferguson that often the Western screech owl, which is declining in numbers, will nest not far from the great horned owl. There's a little bit of protection provided by the great horned owl. So found that very interesting. The little ones are gorgeous to see. Now, again, this is a bird like the bald eagle that depends on our very, very tall and old big trees with broken tops, as often those trees have, and the cavities that they can find within, but way up, and where the branches that are going out are large, and the babies will come out of the cavity and sidle along the branches. And if you ever have that opportunity to see them looking down at you, those big fluff balls, it's a beautiful sight. Okay, now on to the barred owl, which was introduced. Maybe not introduced, I might be wrong on that. Let me just have a quick look here, but it arrived in Salt Spring on the 1990s, and this is an aggressive owl. This is the one commonly seen. Let's hear it.
Okay.
We say, who cooks for you and who cooks for you all? Yeah.
Go ahead. It may continue a little bit, but
Yeah.
there, stop. Good.
Sometimes seen in the day also, and but it's proving to be destructive towards other owls. And I'm talking here about not only the Western screech owl, but even the little saw-whet. So they are in declining numbers, whereas the barred owl is growing in numbers. However, it fears the great horned owl, and the great horns have actually been known to take them down. So all very interesting in the owl world.
John, these are actually migrants from the East Coast, aren't they?
Originally, they were in Florida, but as the forests were cut down and open spaces created, the barred owls need forests for nesting, but they need open spaces, both meadows and marshes, to feed. So they moved up the East Coast and then across the boreal forest. And as Kathleen intimated, the first one was seen in BC in about 1944 in Prince George, and in Victoria in 1966, I think. And then, of course, they've spread on further, and you find them in California now. So they're very successful, also very aggressive. The spotted owl, which we don't have, is also one that has suffered with the attention of the barred owl. And if you have goldfish or snakes or frogs, they're very Catholic in their choice of food. They'll eat other birds, frogs, toads, snakes, goldfish, etc.
I might add that being an eastern owl, the other owls, saw-whets and screeches, have learned over the centuries to deal with them. So their numbers are not declining, despite the fact that they're in native barred owl territory. But as in the last 50 years, as they've moved into British Columbia, the main reason they've moved into British Columbia is because of our massive clear cutting or deforestation. And that's given them an opportunity to move right through the province in the last 30 or 40 years.
And unfortunately, they feed on, we've mentioned this, the Western screech owl, which the populations of which have diminished highly. And you'll notice that the western screech owl is not on your list, those of you in the audience, but it is still on Salt Spring Island. And it's really only found by listening very carefully for the western screech owl at night. And so we would like to encourage you to do that. And if you do hear them, we have Wren Ferguson, who's working with the Conservancy. She's part of our naturalist group, and she's studying these right now, and she would really like to know if you do hear them. So if you're out in the evening, or especially in the evening, probably this is a bit early. The breeding season really gets going later in February, but you'll hear this kind of
Picture
sound.
yourself standing on a beach.
And this is
It's a
John
warm April
introducing it.
evening. The moon is out, the sea is flat calm. Then a western screech owl comes to serenade you.
Just hear the tide in the background.
That was recorded on the Conservancy property.
Beautiful.
That was recorded on the Conservancy property, did you say, Heather?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
South end, west of Culpert Harbor.
So these are, there's only been, what, 3 or 4 pairs now found so far, and I'm part of the study. But by all means, if you do hear these at night, please get a hold of the Conservancy, and they will get Wren mobilized to continue her study with that.
I might add that he is listed, the screech owl is listed on the Christmas bird count. Up until 20 years ago, it was regularly seen at Christmas time. But in the last 20 years, of course, there's been a tremendous plunge in their numbers. And so we have no records on the Christmas bird count since about 2000.
They were last recorded in Ruckle Park on the south end, yeah. But it was in February.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
What about this bird, Peter?
This is my bird.
Oh,
David.
this is Pat. Okay.
This is Anna's hummingbird, and it's the only hummingbird that stays on Salt Spring year round. And it's another bird that has come north. It was originally found only in Baja California and Southern California, but during the last, I guess since the 60s, it's been slowly making its way up the coast, and it's come as far north now as where we are. And it's got a relatively large population here on Salt Spring. My note says that 100 of them have been recorded in the last few years of the count, Christmas bird count. So for a hummingbird, this is a pretty sturdy little bird, and it's got a broad tail that's held stationary in line with its body. And its overall color ranges from the dusky to bright green, depending on how the light catches it. The males have this absolutely resplendent, iridescent rose red head, crown, and gorget. The gorget extends down into either side of the neck and or the throat, sorry. And the females also have a small red throat patch that shines like that as well. Both males and females have a partial white eye ring if you look for it. And immatures look a lot like the adult female. And the interesting thing about these birds is that they are basically able to breed year round. So, you know, you might be able to pick out immatures at any time of the year, basically. Our other hummingbird, the rufous hummingbird, which isn't pictured here, is very seasonal. It comes to us in March when the red flowering, about the time the red flowering currant is blossoming, and it leaves by August to September, so we won't see it in the count. The interesting thing to tell you about these hummingbirds is, well, a couple of things. They, in addition to nectar, they feed on insects and spiders, and they can pluck spiders right out of their webs. I've seen them do that, and that's a really good protein source for them when they're nesting, and also I think helps them get through the winter. And the other thing they can do is they can drink sap from sapsucker, the holes that sapsuckers have made in the trunks of trees, and feed on the insects that they find there as well. And the other interesting thing to tell you is about their heart rate. You know, is, as you know, hummingbirds have this amazing heart rate. So when they're flying, their heart is beating at about more than 1,000 beats a minute. And even when they're at rest, it's about 250 beats a minute. But in the winter, on really cold nights, they go into this torpor-like state where they can drop their body temperature, and then their heart rate can also fall down to as low as 50 beats a minute. So yeah, I think I'd just say it's really important if you're feeding hummingbirds to make sure that your feeders stay thawed on those cold, frosty mornings, and so they can get their first drink right off the bat. And that's all I want to say, except that right now I have about 5 in my garden, and they are really active and really vocal. I don't know if John has some sounds from Anna's bird.
I do, but I'm sorry, I can't instantly go to them.
Okay, you'll just have to take my word for it.
Yeah, Peter, the numbers have been climbing with these birds. They're becoming more and more successful here, aren't they?
Oh, gosh, yes. They're even in the Okanagan now in the winter. I mean, in the winter. They as Pat says, they can lower their heart rate tremendously at night. And they, in the morning, even if your bird feeder's frozen, you take it in by 9 o'clock and put it out again, they can still survive. They're quite extraordinary. And I will tell you, they are the king of the roost in a lot of our gardens, especially mine, or including mine, where they actually act like the caretakers, and they manage all the birds at the feeder, and anything that happens, they rush over and have a look at it. And whatever I'm doing, they come over and hover above me and watch what I'm doing. And any new birds that come in, they run over, they fly over and check them out. They're absolutely funny, and they act like they rule the roost.
And speaking of that extra food that they look for, here's a species that provides some of it.
Yes, this is the red-breasted sapsucker. That is an incredible picture, by the way. I don't know who took it. Wow. And it's our bird that has the complete red head. I mean, there are a number of woodpeckers with red here and there, but nothing like this one. The juvenile, the immatures, females can look a little ragged sometimes, and with the pink, with the red being more of a pink or flush, and so yeah, they can look a little bit unkempt, let's put it that way. But when they do their holes, they're astounding. I mean, they will go, here we go, look at this, and around they go, around those trees, a little bit even like a typewriter doing a line, and then you send that typewriter back, and off they go and make more. And these they are farmers in a sense, because those little holes produces sap, but off goes the bird after making a number of them, and will come back later and have a drink of sap. But meanwhile, there are other birds, and you just mentioned the Anna's hummingbird being one, but there are others that come along and enjoy it. And the sap traps insects, which is also what the sapsucker likes to eat. A very interesting bird.
One of the questions that's just come in is, would the Anna's hummingbird survive without feeders? Feeders have probably helped, but these birds, these sapsuckers, certainly, I see them feeding at the sapsucker holes all the time on our property, the Annas.
Yeah. And another amazing thing is that I have seen trees where the sapsucker holes are around the entire trunk going up, and then some of the branches, and those trees seem to be doing just fine. It's amazing, because we talk about girdling a tree, and from the looks of it, you would think that tree is girdled, but maybe there's some, I don't know, a relationship between these two.
Does anyone have any, just stepping back up to the Annas, does anyone have any comments on whether or not the Annas absolutely rely on our feeders, or are they just assisting them? How is that going?
It's heavy reliance, and I can tell you that in recent years with global warming, Annas would be up here anyway and trying to make it through the winter. And in a normal warm winter, they probably would survive. However, an occasional deep freeze we get for a long period of time, which we got a couple of years ago, there'd probably be a big die-off. So they might just be coming and going occasionally instead of being here as residents with all the feeders.
Also, before we go on, I see there was just a question in the chat about the very loud sound that you sometimes hear from, and it is the Anna's hummingbird that makes that sound. And what's happening is it's when the male is doing its display dive. So, and it gets up really high and it dives down. When it gets to the bottom of its dive, it makes that sound very, very loud. Very distinct.
It can often be near your head, as a matter of fact. I was going to mention that we had a Christmas present one year, which was an Anna's chick fledgling, which had just fledged and came to the feeder on Christmas Day. So, so they can nest right through the season. It's quite remarkable.
Amazing.
Peter.
Yeah, the hairy and the downy. The downy is, we're all familiar with both of these. The downy is pretty easy to identify because of his tiny bill. It's much, much smaller than the hairies. And the two of them, by the way, in the Christmas bird counts, equal numbers, steady numbers over the last 30 years. So they're doing well. And I would say that the one on the left, the downy on the left, is typical of our Pacific Coast race. And if you have another picture of a hairy, by the way, okay, that's a hairy. Now, interestingly enough, that generally looks like an interior race of a hairy. Almost all the hairies we have on the island have a real dusky, ashy breast feathers, and it looks like they've fallen down the chimney. Where these were photographed, I'm not sure. But
I'm sure they were photographed in my backyard.
well, that's interesting because all of mine have the Pacific races, very dark, dirty breast. So I guess occasionally we have these, and I don't think they migrate much. So I guess we have a mix here. And by the way, yeah, there's a wonderful photograph showing the tiny beak of the downy. And again, I would say these are probably an interior picture of an interior race.
This is one of our photographs. It's from Gary Mueller.
This is me again, Northern Flicker. So this is a very large woodpecker. It's pretty distinctive, and it's often seen foraging on the ground in open areas, and it's looking for worms and insects, and it especially likes to eat ants. They also forage in trees for fruits and berries, including our arbutus berries. And it's another bird that stays year round in this area. And in our area, there's two subspecies of flickers. And in our area, we see the red-shafted flicker, which has bright orange red flight feathers and a bright white rump. And it flies, when you see it flying away, it has a kind of undulating flight. It's quite distinctive. Now, both sexes are brown overall with black bars on the back and wings. And they have this kind of black necklace at the base of their throat. And they have a slightly down curved bill. But the red-shafted males can be identified like this one because it has this red malar or mustache, and the females don't have that. And let's see what else. Occasionally in our area, we can see hybrids of the yellow-shafted and the red-shafted. And in that case, you should always be looking and see if you can see males that have both that red mustache as well as a red crescent at the nape of their neck. Have a look for that. They're very vocal birds, and they're calling out. I don't know if we have any sounds to play for you.
Oh.
But especially in spring, you hear them drumming. They're renowned for drumming on the metal and making very large sounds to stake out their territory. And
The contact call at this time of year, Pat, and all through the winter, it sounds like clear, clear. And you can
yes,
often hear them at quite a distance, which may attract you to see them as well, but often they're hidden in the trees and you just hear the clear note.
yes.
We don't have a recording, but we have the recordists mimicking very nicely.
I don't think I'm going to try and do the mimicking. I think I'll leave that to John.
Okay.
And this is my bird also. And now this is a very large woodpecker, even larger than the flicker. It's the Pileated Woodpecker, and it's when you see one, it's an amazing thing to see and so unmistakable. It looks like it's reminiscent of a prehistoric pterodactyl. This bird, so large, and so both the male and female have this red crest, and on the male, the red crest extends down to the base of the bill. And that's how you can tell them apart. And they have, as you can see, this kind of black and white striped face and black body. And then they have, you can't see here, but there's a white wing patch, which is quite distinctive when they're flying. And a long tail that they use to support themselves when they're up in the tree pecking away, drumming away. And then the male also has a red stripe that extends from the base of the bill down across the cheek. So pileated calls, just like the flicker, only more so, can be heard from a long ways away, and they're very loud, and they ring out through the trees, and as they fly, they have this kind of strong, slow, sure wing beat, and they alternate with glides. And the contact calls are they're shorter, kind of, I'm not going to say it, maybe John can venture to say whoop, whoop. But anyway, they're very distinctive when you hear them and see them, so hard to miss.
How about it, John? Got that call too?
I'm not going to attempt that. Oh, well, keck. It's
Okay.
similar to a male Cooper's hawk, actually, but they still make their regular call sometimes because the two birds, they're monogamous, and they cover large territories. So they keep in touch through the day at long distances by using their vocal ability. And I've never witnessed this, but I've been told that they do cross paths during the day and will often meet on a log or a branch and touch bills, which is quite touching, not meaning to pun. But they also nest in adjacent tree holes during the winter.
Well, let's move on to the jays and crows. We'll probably move just a little faster for this next part. And this would be Steller's jay would be Kathleen.
Yeah, lovely bird. Such a blue, beautiful. And we have the Steller's jay here just along the coast, well, east of the west of the Rockies, I should say. The blue jay, some of you may well known, is east of the Rockies and goes all across the continent. The Steller's jay is an aggressive little guy, like all jays, and very interested in bothering the young hawks. And we've seen that, and it can be commonly seen actually in the Burgoyne Park and Valley. There's a big, enormous Gary oak tree in which the hawks will sometimes be, and you can hear and see those jays pestering it. It's kind of fun to watch. Beautiful bird. And I think I'm going to let you go on with the crow, Peter.
Well, some of you might be shocked because it's no longer a northwestern crow, and there David has written in the proper nomenclature. It's an American crow now, although I don't think anybody's very happy about that. And I've heard rumors that they may reinstate the northwestern crow name. But in the meantime, we're stuck with American crow. On the island, surprisingly, there's been quite a decline over the last 30 years. From numbers in the thousands, we're down now to the low hundreds. I don't know why. They tend to enjoy the beach, low elevations along the shoreline. At our elevation at 600 feet, I've never seen a crow at this. We're all raven. This is raven country. The crows stick to the shoreline pretty definitely. Interestingly enough, there's the fish crow, very similar to our northwestern crow in the southeastern United States, is a bird of the beaches as well.
Now, should you be in an area where you see a number of blackbirds, there are great differences between crows and ravens in their behavior. So here's the raven. It's a larger bird, a very big bill. Now in flight, though, the raven will quite often be alone, sometimes in twos, but never in groups larger than that. And the crows there will be many in a group. Also in flight, look carefully at the tail of both of these birds. The raven's tail is a wedge shaped, and the crow is cut straight off. And another interesting feature, I think, of the raven, and it's a bird that you can hear. You can hear its flight long before you see it. And in fact, you don't even have to see it. You can hear that flapping of the wings. And you think, it's got to be a raven. You cannot hear a crow in flight, but the raven, you certainly can. And it's kind of neat to say, hey, I think that could be a raven. Okay.
Let's move on to a smaller set of a set of smaller birds, and maybe Pat, you could tell us a bit about this one.
This is the little chestnut-backed chickadee. So I would say that this is the second most frequently seen bird in our Christmas bird counts on Salt Spring Island. And I'll get to the winner of that contest a little bit later on. So if this is a small bird, and you can see that it has this very rich chestnut color on its back and its flanks, and then the black and white head and the white breast and belly. And it's so curious, this bird. I sometimes think it gets it into trouble, but it's one of those birds that will sometimes come right down. If you have seed in your hand and you extend your arm out, it's bold enough to come right down and feed from your hand. And I often see these birds at my bird bath first thing in the morning, and they're from there they're feeding up in the on the cones and the conifers. Mostly is where I see them in my yard. It has a really rapid, steady chip, 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 chip call song, and then its call is more, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but it's much more what you would expect, the chickadee dee 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 call. And it eats spiders and seeds and different kinds of insects. And I'm sure you all have seen this bird around.
And the bushtit, oh, it's just the neatest little guy. They're often seen in flocks of 10, 20, and pretty exciting to see them. They might be near some of the very other smaller birds we have, but they have quite a long tail. It's not very visible in this one. A little bit of brownish on their body and mostly gray, but there's an assortment of sounds that bush tits make, and soft, not too loud, but you can hear them. It's a fascinating bird as far as its nest is concerned. We've seen now a couple of nests on the island, one in Burgoyne and the other one at the Conservancy, actually, near close to Blackburn Lake. Woven nest, extraordinarily long, like a big long sock, amazingly made, and within that nest, I mean, we're talking about this is a tiny bird, but the nest is maybe a foot long at least, and it made every single year. It's not something that they come back to. Made every year, and it jiggles as they get into it. It's fun to watch and see that. Quite interesting little bird. Okay.
Peter.
Well, this is everybody's favorite. What will we do without our little red-breasted nuthatch? I don't have to describe him to you. We all know him well. But and I tell you that the red-breasted nuthatch tends to be the leader of a pack of mixed species when they move through the woods, and when there's an enemy around, a Cooper's hawk or something like that. It's usually the nuthatch that is scolding the most. So if you hear a lot of scolding in the woods, it'll probably be the nuthatch leading the pack.
This is the brown creeper, and it's known as the up the tree bird. And it has, as you can see, it has this very streaky grayish brown back and white undersides, and it uses those claws to creep up the side of a tree, and it actually creeps along and up the tree in a spiral. So you have to follow it round as you're watching it. It uses its tail to buttress itself against the base of the tree and hold itself steady. And it's very well camouflaged, I'd say, against tree trunks. So it can be quite difficult to see. But let's see, what else can I say about it? It has a very high, thin, lispy call, which I'm sorry to say I have trouble hearing these days as my hearing gets worse. And and the other thing to look at here, in addition to its quite long toes or claws, it has this really neat decurved beak, and it uses that beak to poke into the layers of the bark and look for insects and spiders and such. And this is mine as well. This is a Berwick's wren. It's one of my favorite birds. I have them nesting in my yard. And this bird is distinguished by its very long white eye line. And also it has this very long thin beak. And it's quite an unstreaked, plain brown bird with, let's say, grayish to reddish brown upper parts and plain white, or in this case, it looks kind of dusky gray underpart. And it's again, it has a really long tail. And when we come to the next species, the Pacific wren, you can compare that bird has a much shorter tail. This one, Bewick's, is typically found in thickets and brushy, shrubby habitats. And I find it to be quite territorial in my yard. It's quite bossy and makes its presence known. I often hear it call before I can actually see it and zero in on it. And sometimes they're brave enough to, I have a big bamboo right next to my deck, and it comes through the bamboo and makes its way up onto the deck. And then I can get a pretty good look at it. So it's a beautiful little bird.
This is our winter wren, now called the Pacific wren. We have a lot of them on the island. People don't realize just how many we have. And I found out an interesting way, but I just wanted to mention the Pacific wren's vocalization is absolutely extraordinary. It's famous. We only hear a small part of its vocalization. And I don't know whether John has a recording, but the repertoire is spectacular, and the range is way beyond our hearing. So we're just getting a small part of one of the most beautiful, diverse songs in the bird world. When I first came here about 9 or 10 years ago, they stuck me in really poor habitat on the Christmas bird count, and in retaliation, I decided to take my cell phone. And you're not supposed to do this, but in the winter, I don't think it made any difference. And besides, the wrens, I think, enjoyed it. I walked down Cushion Lake Road to Bettis Road, and then down Bettis Road, and I recorded. I got the Pacific wren to call out back to me about every 30 meters. And that was about for at least a kilometer. So you can, if you extend that around the island, you can imagine how many wrens we really have in the winter here.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll just go on a little bit about this wren, which I saw actually today. It is the cutest thing, and that little upright tail and so short is what is distinctive about it. The slight eye-ring white line there, but nothing like the Bewick's wren, which would be the next species to compare it with. The Bewick's wren is quite a bit bigger. It not only has it got that repertoire, but the volume just astonishes me how it can project from such a tiny little creature. John, have you got any ideas about how it does it?
Well, you know that birds have a syrinx, their voice box, and it's divided into two. And they can operate them separately or in concert. So they can produce different sounds out of each box at the same time or very quickly after each other. So you get that wide range of vocal sounds from some birds, like the wren, that it's able to project in such a coordinated fashion using both sides of the box. It's not just one voice box like ours. It has two parts. So the left and the right sides can operate in coordination or separately. So you can produce a lot of different sounds.
Wow, that's fascinating. And some of the birds have really great sounds too. So I want to go right on to the crowned kinglet.
Hey, before you do this though, David, because this is my bird, go back because there is a little thing. We've got to hear that one. You see the
It doesn't work though, unfortunately. That button is not active. I apologize. Whoever put this together didn't get that coordinated. So, and that same person is a little worried about taking too much time, so would like to keep things moving.
No promises. Okay, I'm going to talk about the next three birds. This is the golden crowned kinglet, and following it will be the ruby crowned kinglet, and then the Hutton's vireo. These birds are tiny, and they're difficult to they can be very difficult to determine which ones they are. So the golden crown kinglet, though, is much easier than the others. That black and white, you see the black and white, and before the gold on the top, and that can grab your attention. First of all, it has a high pitch sound. You may hear that before you see them. It's also difficult to hear, but a high pitched sound, I guess. Do we have that here? How about this one?
We'll try it.
Yeah, that's it. Mhm. And yeah, out in the wild, that's even harder to hear. That's a very good recording. Out in the wild, it's harder to hear. They, the thing about golden crown kinglets is that they're often with others. They're not a solitary bird. They like to be with their own kind and bobbing around, quite often at the tops of trees. Because from where I live, I'm pretty much in the tops of trees and can see them. But then again, they'll land on the ground also. So they have quite a variation in habitat. Let's go on to the ruby crown kinglets. Now, this little guy, you can see in this picture a few tiny feathers on the top, which are supposedly the ruby crown. One is really lucky to ever see the crown. They can be a little bit better than that, but you have to determine this bird from other features. It's very, very small, but its behavior is most interesting. It will often hover, and so it has on the wing, on its little body, the wing, and you can see two white wing bars. Behind the second longer wing bar is a black bold band. That is quite distinctive of this little bird, but it's very difficult to see because this bird is flitting and moving so fast. You should take note of the beak. The beak is tiny and thin. The white eye ring is very similar to the next bird, which is the Hutton's vireo. And this is not a particularly good picture of that white ring. But this bird and the ruby crown kinglet are very similar. However, let's look at the beak of the two of them. And that's a better picture for that white eye ring. Yeah, it's much chunkier. Also note to those white wing bars, there are two. Again, there are two, but below that second one, there is not that black bold band. There's a little bit of black between the two, but not below. And that's the one that sticks out. If you do get a chance to glance at the feet, notice that there are differences there in color. But these two birds, the ruby crown kinglet and the Hutton's vireo, confound most of us. We really have to, the ruby crown moves so fast all over the place. They're in thickets. They love blackberry thickets, which doesn't help because they disappear within them. And on count day, where we really have to look very closely to determine what we have. Hope that's helpful.
Oh. Okay, this is the hermit thrush, and this is one of my most favorite birds. I think I like it so much because it's got such subtle, delicate coloration. So it's a kind of beautiful, rich brown back with a rufous tail. And then you can note that its head is quite round and it has a slender, straight bill. And the pale breast is very delicately spotted, and that's such a beautiful sight to see. It also, if you look, has a very thin white eye ring. It stands pretty upright, and in comparison with robins and berry thrush, which will come along next, it's a little bit smaller than that. So, and the other thing I'd say about them is you tend to see them as solitary birds, or maybe two at a time, but they don't. You never see flocks of them. Oh, I'm not done.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say, the one thing that's really, one of the ways you can really, when you're not sure about a hermit thrush, is if you look at them, they have a way of cocking their tail and then slowly bobbing the tail and flapping their wings at the same time. So when you see a bird doing that, then, and it fits the description, then you've got a hermit thrush. And the other thing I'd say is it feeds on the ground. So a lot like other birds that we're going to get to here, it uses its feet to it jumps on its feet and scratches away the leaf litter and debris and looks for insects and other goodies in the soil.
All right, the robin. A pretty ordinary bird, one might say. I learned very recently that robins do not hunt or do not locate their worms by sight, but they do so because they hear the worm moving under the ground. And so therefore they know where to pull that worm out. And that's astonishing. I mean, I'm trying to think about what kind of sounds worms are making. John, do you have any feel for that one?
No. Can I make a comment about the robin?
Sure.
At this time of year, we have a lot of extra robins. They arrive in often big flocks in November. Last time we were out doing a count at Burgoyne, we counted about 80, and they come from elsewhere, up the mountains and further north, I presume. But I'd like you to listen. I think most people can recognize a robin. During the springtime, they make a lovely song. Cheer up, cheerily. If it's a sunny day like today, you might hear that song. They will sing in the winter if it's a nice sunny day, but their contact calls give you a lot more clues. If you've seen a few of these flocks, especially coming up to Christmas bird count, and you listen, you'll notice there are a lot more making their contact notes in the bushes, often obscure to see them, but you'll get a better idea of the numbers in that particular area and the size of the flock. This is what they often sound like. That's me.
Okay, I'll point out that last year we had an incredible number on the bird count, over 5,000. Now, this was not a record, surprisingly, but they, as John says, they're coming onto the island in big numbers. And again, this year we have a heavy crop of arbutus berries, and we are likely to see a lot. Now, amongst them, maybe at times the varied thrush. So David, you could bring that one forward. And when we were on our count, Pat and I actually last year, it looked carefully, because the varied thrush can be amongst some of the robins when they're down on the ground and feeding and in the bushes. And they are such a quiet bird. So distinct, beautiful markings, as you can see on this bird, but they don't bring attention to themselves. In fact, they when we come upon them when we're walking, robins will make a clatter and you know, noisy clatter and go up into the branches above, but the varied thrush slink away, in a sense. They fly quietly away. They do not announce themselves. So look carefully, because we found it difficult. At times we thought, that's a robin, but no, it turned out to be a varied thrush. And so an important bird on the count to look out for. I just go back to the robin quickly. The robins fly in these flocks, which where there's quite a distance between the birds. There will be, I don't know if it's 3-4 feet or more, a meter or so between birds, but they're not tight flocks. They are quite a distance between them. So something also to look out for.
Peter, your favorite.
Oh, yeah, sure. Everybody's favorite. I'm not so sure about that. But thanks to Shakespeare and everybody's fondness for the birds that Shakespeare noted in his ballads and so forth, we have a dispersal of them. And I think it was Central Park in about 1880. And sadly, they have taken over North America by storm. They're everywhere. And unfortunately, they, being cavity nesters, they've displaced the bluebirds and the purple martins, and it's really been tough on cavity nesters. They are wonderful songsters, and they're quite good imitators. I think they even can imitate a human voice. That's all I'll say about them.
This is the cedar waxwing. And so as you can see by just looking at this photo, that it's a very distinctive bird. It has this beautiful black mask, but it also has, you can see the feathers at the top of its head. When they rise up, they form a beautiful crest. And the other thing that you can notice about this bird, two things actually, you have to look a bit closer, but on the tips of the secondary flight feathers, wing feathers, they have these waxy droplets. And that's actually how the cedar waxwing gets its name. And then at the very base, at the very tip of the tail, sorry, it's yellow. And that yellow, that coloration is influenced by diet. And in this area, we tend to see yellow tips. The interesting thing about this bird is that at this time of year, it's probably feeding on berries, but in the summer, it's an aerial predator. So it's hawking insects out of midair. And we had some good sightings of this bird in Burgoyne earlier this fall, where we saw quite large flocks of them there. And also we saw them in the spring, because there's at least some of them that nest in Burgoyne. And I think that's all I'm going to say about them.
Okay, we have sparrows. We have about 20 minutes left, so we'll just keep moving right along here. And the first sparrow is the spotted towhee.
And that's my bird. And that, along with the Anna's hummingbird, I have to say, this is the bird that rules the roost in my yard. These birds know every inch of my garden off by heart, and they are always out there. They have this very distinctive red eye, and they might, you might at first glance confuse them with robins because of the coloration, but they're quite different birds, and they're almost always close to the ground, or else they're making their way, through dense vegetation and sort of shrubby growth. They have this great way of feeding where they are hopping on 2 feet and lifting the leaf litter and searching underneath that for insects and seeds and whatever else they can find to eat. Let's see, they're very vocal. They make, especially in spring when the males are on territory, they sing on territory, and they have this kind of raspy, buzzy song, and they also have a call that sometimes makes you think you've heard a cat, a kind of mew call. And the other thing I'd say that's distinctive about them, of course, is those beautiful white spots on the wing, and at the base of at the bottom of the tail, they also have white. So
Hawk sparrow, you'll notice immediately has a very densely spotted breast, unlike the song sparrow, which tends to be more streaky and a little smaller. This is our Pacific Coast or sooty fox sparrow that hugs the coast from Alaska to coast of California. And in the interior, we have one that has more gray back and has a different song and totally different habitat. In the interior, it nests primarily up towards the subalpine. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful song. Our coastal one will nest, of course, at various altitudes, including some of the islands in the Gulf of Georgia. Oh, yeah. No, that's okay. We'll go to the song sparrow, sure.
Okay, now as Peter has pointed out, the breast is somewhat lighter and more streaked in the song sparrow. There is a point on the breast where it's darker, so it comes to a spot on the breast, and that's diagnostic of this bird. Also, this one looks quite light on its head, but you've got a gray and a brown sort of stripe on the head, which is important to look at because there are much more exciting sparrows. And the song is a beautiful song, classic down on the shoreline, because these birds are often along the shores. And it's the first 2 notes or 3 notes.
Maids, put on the kinelet.
Great.
Yes. And when it first sings, it's those 2 clear notes that are the same note, the same pitch, sometimes 3, and before it goes into its song. And good, we're done with that one.
The golden crown sparrow. This was my favorite bird in the interior when I had my ranch in Upper Hat Creek. There in the interior, they nest in the subalpine exclusively. You'll never see them lower than that. And the song is especially lovely. He sings, "Oh, poor me, I'm so sad." And I don't know whether John has that, but you'll hear him even in the winter. And that song came from the miners climbing up the Chilkoot Pass in the 1800s, and they were greeted by this sad song up in the alpine. Here on the coast, you'll see them late in the spring still, and you're wondering what the heck they're doing here. But we do have they do nest on the coast as well, but I suspect a lot of them are waiting until the snow recedes in the mountains of the interior, where they will nest in July, and then wait until the snow melts.
John, let's hear that sound again, and then we'll hear with a recorded one.
It was only an imitation.
What was it like? Yeah, this is my favorite bird around here too, and I got a sound. Similar.
Yeah.
Yours is better. They should take your sound, I think, rather than this.
That's a nice recording.
This is the female as of the golden crown as well. And this one, Peter.
Oh, the white crown. White crown is absolutely amazing. We tend to pass them off as a fairly common nesting here in the summer, and not as many in the winter, but they're still here in smaller numbers than the golden crown. But the interesting thing is there are races all over the place. There are races of white crowns with a very distinctive vocalization in areas as small as a peninsula in central California, covering only about a few hundred acres. It'll be a different race. And here you'll see them nesting in the parking lot at the grocery store, country grocer. But in the interior, they only nest in the subalpine, just a little lower than the golden crowns. So they're quite remarkable, and many varieties, and has not been enough research on all the races and all their vocalizations.
Jenny Sands is pointing out that there's quite a bit in the open areas on Channel Ridge right now. So they are already back. We'll move on.
Okay, this is me. This is the little dark-eyed junco. And this is the winner of the Christmas bird count, the most commonly sighted bird during the Christmas bird counts on Salt Spring Island. And it's also the most abundant forest bird in North America, I was reading today. And the population is estimated to be at about 630 million individuals, I think between Canada, US, Mexico. It's a small sparrow, and it's pretty distinctive. You know, it has, this is the male, and it has this really dark black hood. The female colors are similar, but they're much more subdued. And they tend to go around in small groups and flocks, foraging on the ground. And when they fly, this is a really good thing to know, really distinctive. They have white on their outer tail feathers. So when you see them fly, they're easy to identify if you haven't already got them down. And yeah, they have this kind of distinctive chip alarm call, and also they have a sort of single pitched trill that they do. So both of those are pretty distinctive. That's it for them.
Moving on to the finches group, and
Red-winged blackbird, lovely bird. As you can see, those scarlet epaulettes on the shoulders. This is the male who sings and heralds the spring, the arrival of spring on the prairies. And of course, on the prairies, winter is long, long, and it is a joyful sound. Now, today, we only have the sound from my little granddaughter's right here. So I'm going to play that for you. I know you know this sound. There, I'm sure you've heard it. And quite a few on the count. I understand the female, let's move right on to that one. Yes, there she is. She's very, very different. And the males will come back first and sing all around the marshes, wetlands. And then she arrives and is builds a nest right in the rushes, in the bulrushes. So she's quite amazing in that sense. All right.
John mentioned also the collections of them, the groupings that we see in the winter. Where's that, John?
Well, Kathleen mentioned that they migrate south. Here, it's so mild on Salt Spring that they don't migrate, but they do gather together in the milder parts of the island. And there are at least 4 winter roosts. And if they happen to be on your part of the count, such as Fernwood Dock or at Bettis Beach, if you walk down that trail, there's another little flock in the middle of Ganges, and there's another one that I know of on Lee's Hill, and there may be a 5th one, but they're the birds that spend the summer in the marshes around Salt Spring, and that's where they winter. And that sound that Kathleen played sounds rather like Conqueria.
I might mention that in the summer, if you're down at Blackburn Lake and see a few male redwings showing off their epaulets, you'd be surprised to know that his harem may consist of 15 nesting females, that many.
To be able to make good sounds. And brewer's blackbirds also make a lot of sounds, but you're not likely to hear them too much in the winter here on Salt Spring. We seem to be right at the northern range of the brewer's blackbird. To the south, they're in huge groupings and very noisy groupings all the way down through California. And if you want to see them in BC, you can carefully watch around Salt Spring, but you can also go to Esquimalt Lagoon in Victoria, which is where I took this photo. And it's actually is two photos. I photoshopped them together to get the male and the female, I have to admit. But it's so amazing the difference between the two sexes in this bird. So I wanted to put that in. But they are a noisy bird when you see them in very large flocks. They are really common in agricultural land. Peter.
Yeah, we've got lots of purple finches. The confusion, of course, is between the house finch and the purple finch. The purple finch generally is a darker red-brown, and the voice, the vocalization is quite distinctive, but they can be confused. I won't spend much more time on that, but we'll just move on to the house finch. This is interesting because it depends on your diet, what you look like. And that house finch on the left is in a cholla cactus in Arizona. And thanks to his diet, he's sporting a very pale pink, a beautiful pink breast and head, and quite different from the house finch on the right, which looks like a local one, which is much darker, and the streaks are a little heavier. And again, he can be confused with the purple finch, except he's a little lighter coloring, and his vocalization is different.
Okay, the red crossbill. It's a most interesting bird for several reasons. The males will be quite red. This one is kind of orange, and that too is a possibility, right through to the females, which may be a brighter yellow. So these birds will be seen at the tops of our fir trees. That's a Douglas fir cone there. They are remarkable in that they winter in cold weather. We've had them in Edmonton at -35 in bird counts, on the flying into little flocks, flying into the tops of spruce trees at -35. It's extraordinary. And here, of course, it doesn't get that cold, but the crossbill, which you cannot see very well, but you can see that the bracts of the fir cones, the cross they are able to use that to pull the bract down, and then the tongue goes in and takes out the seed, the small seed. They move quickly. They're very adept at what they're doing, and in small flocks, yes. Oh, there's the cross bill. Very pretty, as a big bill, and the bird is a little bit bigger, larger than the other finches. Yeah. And now to the pine siskin, which can also be seen in flocks. Now, these are alder cones. The pine siskins will be in flocks of much greater numbers, up to the hundreds. And you'll hear them at the tops often of conifers. So the Douglas fir also, and alders. And that's how you'll first notice them. And it's very difficult sometimes to determine this bird. It's very difficult sometimes to see the yellow, especially on a sunny day. And you might not be sure of what you're seeing, but in those large flocks now, these are pine siskins. They're here on the island, and we're likely to see them in great quantities. There were over 3,400 pine siskins counted on the bird count last year.
One of the last two birds we're going to talk about before we get into a couple of bonus species and talking about the Christmas bird count. And this one is the American goldfinch, an unlikely sighting for the winter, but there have been a few seen over the years in winter bird counts. But I've seen them quite recently put out some sunflowers that had dried, and the birds flock to those sunflowers and eat the sunflower seeds. So that's a good way to try experimentations, save a few of your sunflowers and put them out in the winter. The other bird that's quite common unfortunately, it's another invasive species that was brought in thanks to William Shakespeare. It ended up in North America and is kind of a pest. It does take over bird houses of native birds. It's kind of a neat bird, but it's not really a true sparrow. It's in the European sparrow group, a different sparrow group, but from England originally. And now for the bonus species, what we're going to do is go through 4 bonus species, then say a few words about the Christmas bird count. And we're going to open it up for people who are inexperienced to possibly join with experts, and people who really good at birding could also join. So wanted to say a few birds about birds that possibly could be seen and aren't on your list if you have the list in front of you.
Now, this must be Peter's photo, and he's had one on his property that was amazing. We've also had one on our property here down on the top of a dead older arbutus branch, and that bird sat there. It's about the size of a robin, and at first when I saw it, I had never seen a Townsend solitaire before, and the white eye rings, so distinctive but beautifully uniformly gray all over, the size of a robin. And as far as its behavior, it sat there, and we took out book after book and just to confirm that we had a Townsend solitaire. It was there for at least 15 minutes. Okay, I've also seen one down on the shore. Peter, tell us more.
Yeah, he's very territorial, and they do show up on the island, except for the summer, and around southern Vancouver Island every so often they're reported. But the interesting thing about him is that on our deck, we have some berry bushes that he likes, and I'm sure it's the same one who's come back every winter. Not last year, but for several successive winters. And I know he's territorial because in the interior, he habituates groves of juniper, the berries. He loves those berries to the point where it's his juniper grove, usually on a bunch grass slope, all winter long. He defends that territory fiercely and drives everybody away. No robin is allowed in that patch of junipers. He's quite something, and he has a lovely song.
Yeah, Peter, is that the kitchen active at your house? I wondered. But to go on, we don't usually see warblers in the winter, but Peter says there are a couple.
Yeah, the yellow-rumped and occasionally which is also called Audubons. The yellow-rumps here sometimes in the winter because they're pretty hardy, and their taste is rather Catholic. They're one of the first early to arrive in the spring because they don't necessarily need insects. They can scrounge around for anything, even on the ground. I've seen them in the middle of snowstorms in April, early April, the first warblers in the interior, and they're on the ground in the middle of the snowstorm foraging for I'm not sure what, but they're amazing birds. And the East Coast, of course, he has a white rump patch, and he's called a myrtle warbler. And again, in the winter, you'll see them on their Christmas bird count on Long Island and Massachusetts, occasionally foraging for berries.
The other warbler that we've seen here is during the winter months is the Townsend's warbler. They also like the arbutus berries. So it is possible there's that black eye patch that distinguishes this bird. Pretty exciting to see warblers at this time of year. I'll just go back to briefly the Townsend solitaire. John has told me and had me listen to the song of the Townsend solitaire. It's incredible. I don't think do you have that, John?
Not instantly. I'm sorry. With these recordings, I need to set them up, and I can't do it quick enough for this program.
No, of course not. But to those of you who are out there, if you purchase any of John's tapes, the Townsend's, go and listen to the Townsend solitaire. It's very exciting. Okay, sooty grouse, I think, is next.
Oh, yes.
Oh, sooty grouse. That's on my porch. And he's he's he was called the spruce grouse, but they split him up, and he's our Pacific coastal sooty now, and the interior one is called the dusky. But the amazing, you should see them in the spring when he raises his neck patch. It's just quite spectacular. And they are so bold. In the early spring, they start marching around our property and walk in the garage. They just go everywhere. I think they walk in the front door. And they're really feisty if in the spring when they're courting and he's doing his courtship displays, he doesn't want any other spruce or sooty grouse or dusky grouse around him, to the point where I had left a speaker on the ground in the woods about 20 feet from me once when I was recording, I think, lazuli buntings. And this guy came up all puffed up doing his courtship, and he attacked my speaker and just beat the hell out of it. Could not believe it. And we have on the island here a movie that Wren took of Tony McLeod's foot being attacked by a sooty grouse. Anyway, they're wonderful birds and they can be quite tame.
We'll pass that along. I should mention also that Pierre pointed out that there's a Townsend solitaire in the Andreas Voigt Nature Reserve recently, and that the yellow-rumped warbler, this is from Razzie to everyone, the yellow-rumped warbler was chasing his car down the driveway trying to get in the window. I've had them try to get in my lab, and it's not really trying to get in. They're arguing with their reflection in the window, I think, and it's happened to me several years. So they're around, but that was during the summer. And finally, at the American kestrel. Who's that?
That's me. Now, this is another favorite bird of mine. It's a small falcon. It's about robin size. And you can see this is the male with its slate blue wing and spotted breast. And the female has a much more brown rufous coloration with the streaks on its back and bars across its back. And I wanted to tell the story about how all last summer and fall, I really watched a male kestrel almost every day up on Channel Ridge in one of the west-facing slopes, just where everyone walks, all the dogs and humans and all the bicyclists, and it just seemed to be totally oblivious to all of that as it went around its business. And I spent one afternoon just watching it. They perch on high up on snags and dead trees and poles and wherever they can find where they have a good outlook over this kind of open habitat that they like to hunt in. And this one in particular was hunting grasshoppers, and very successfully, I might say. And yeah, they also, they eat a variety of things. They eat small rodents, and they eat snakes and lizards and frogs, and yeah, they seem to be quite successful, although I think in recent years overall their populations are declining. In the spring, this male bird, or the male bird that I saw, was joined by a female, and there was quite a long and very public courtship up there on Channel Ridge. They were very vocal and very easy to see, and particularly noisy when the male was coming in with something in its beak to impress the waiting female. And yeah, that's this bird. I haven't actually seen him lately, or the one that I've been seeing, and I did lose track of them when they were nesting this spring, so I didn't actually see the young. But I understand from Peter that a kestrel was seen recently right at the junction of the southbound road down to Burgoyne off of Fulford Ganges Road. So you might see if you can spot them. I'm sure they're around, and hopefully we'll see them during the count.
And finally, regarding the winter bird count, you may possibly see a bird that's showing up in larger and larger numbers over the years, and is really thought of as more of a southern bird. It's the turkey vulture. We've had them for most of the years I've been here, for coming in the summer and then leaving in the fall. And they group up on southern Vancouver Island, cross the Juan de Fuca Strait, and head down, usually to California, where they put on sunglasses and spend the winter there. But it turns out that more and more are showing up and staying over in BC. So that may, again, as Peter mentioned, may again be a factor in climate change. But last year we had in the Christmas bird count 4 turkey vultures. So if you're going to participate this year, it's another bird to watch out for. And I put this, I like this photo because it's a sort of a sassy photo, the birds sassing back at us. So put that in at the end. And now we'd like to spend just a moment to talk about the Christmas bird count. This is an event that happens in mid-December here on Salt Spring. Peter, just briefly about the background for the Christmas bird count.
Oh, well, yes. In the 19th century, the slaughter of birds around North America was just abysmal. Hunting and market gunning decimated just about every species of bird imaginable. But then in the year 1900, some folks in New Jersey decided enough's enough. We're going to have a get together at Christmas and count birds instead of shooting them. And they formed the Audubon Society, and that's how we got our first Christmas bird count. And it's been such a success that there are now Christmas bird counts all over the world. And in North America, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And that it never ends, and it keeps getting more popular than ever. It also can be very competitive, but it also has become extremely scientific. The evidence from of these counts going back more than 100 years have been invaluable in determining population trends.
Very valuable data, isn't it? And it's considered by most science people to be the largest citizen science research project in the world. It involves so many people. And we have a small one going here, and Peter and Kathleen are the two leaders of this event on the north end of the island. And so maybe Kathleen could mention a little bit about how people could get involved and who could get involved.
All right, I'm glad you brought up that map. You can see the various different zones for the north end. We have captains pretty much in all of those zones who are ready to take your name and perhaps they'll query you as to your ability as a birder, or whether you just like to go along and join one of the more experienced birders. It is a huge learning experience. It's a wonderful day. You'll be with people who know their birds well, and you will be useful in one way or another. So contact me. I think my is about to come up, my email, and if also you live in the south end, yeah, you can contact me and I'll put you, oh, you've got Joe Weber. Okay, excellent. I didn't know that you had that. So Joe Weber, this is his area. A lot of zone 2 is covered, not so much zone 1, down Isabella Point Way and all. So we need people to help us out. Yeah. Please get in touch if you are interested. That's on the 19th, coming up Sunday, 2 weeks from today.
19th coming up, and that I'd also like to mention we have incredible birders here. So you'd be going out with the four of our best presenters for today. Thank you so much, Kathleen, John, Pat, and Peter. And
Happy birding, everybody.
happy birding. And I wanted to remind people that John's bird sound recordings are available. You can go right to the Apple iTunes store. And also next spring, John has agreed to do another one of his wonderful seminars where he really focuses in on the bird sounds. So you don't want to miss that. We'll be notifying people about that. Thank you all for attending. We did go over a little bit, but we moved along towards the end, and very happy to have you today. Pleasant birding again, as John said, and hope to see you out in the field one of these days. So thanks very much.
Goodbye, all.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, Peter, Kathleen, Pat.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a pleasure. A lot of fun. There we are.